Morning, everybody. Now, in the last class, we started discussing Sino-Indian ties, in which we have discussed the major bones of contention between India and China. And today we'll complete that first of all and discuss then India-Pakistan relations. Very interesting relations. Clear. And both the countries are responsible for rhetoric against each other. So let's see what are the bones of contention between India and Pakistan too. Now, as far as we have discussed the land pearl theory, we have discussed the string of pearls theory, we have discussed the other theories also, the other points of difference, stippled visas, for example, we have discussed in the last class. Now, the other bones of contention between India and China includes what? China's support to Pakistan, because this is responsible for disturbing the uh, balance of power in the Indian subcontinent and triggers arms race. That's one thing. Second is also India's nuclear weapons program. Because when India conducted the second nuclear experiment in 1998, the letter which was given by Prime Minister Mr. Vajpayee to the US President pointed fingers at China as the reason behind this second nuclear experiment. Then third is what? Presence of no, Daulat Beg Road is under the control of India. I said that Daulat Beg Oldie Road, the Darbuk Shayok, Daulat Beg Oldie Road has been constructed by India. Has been constructed by India, and this is a bone of contention because this has been opposed by China. Because China does not want the presence of India near CPEC. Clear? And sir, India banned 138 Chinese apps. What is the effect on Chinese economy? See, Chinese economy hardly is affected by this. Hardly affected by this, because China has its presence worldwide. In open market system, um, can any country this type of banned? No, it cannot be. It should not be done. But then India took this measure as a retaliation against China, and retaliation was against the Galwan crisis. Fine. The Daulat Beg Oldie Road is under the control of India. We have discussed that. Clear. Now, let's move forward. See, other bones of contention between India and China is also the growing naval presence of China in Indian Ocean. We have discussed string of pearls theory, and also the Chinese support given to insurgency in India, and also the support given by China to the Red Corridor of India. Red Corridor of India is the area which has been infested by the Naxalites. So that is called as the Red Corridor, which has been supported by China. And all these are. But there are other bones of contention also. For example, the bones of contention also is the frontier road which is developed by India in the northeast. From Arunachal Pradesh onwards, it is developed, and this would be coming at the end to the India-Myanmar border. So the frontier road also happens to be a matter of concern between India and China. Then Ganga Mekong initiative. So last year the Tawang clashes were because of the frontier road, and Ganga Mekong initiative, and that's 1700 kilometer of road which has been developed, which is being developed by India, and on the Sino-Indian border. And not only this, the Ganga Mekong initiative is a concern. The Ganga Mekong initiative was launched in the year 2000. And this has some main areas of common interest, which includes culture, which includes tourism, which includes transport, which includes education. And it includes 6 countries. These 6 countries are India, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, Thailand, Myanmar. So 6 countries, and China does not want this initiative to uh, spurt up. So that's another concern between India and China. So all these are the concerns between India and China. Clear? So that you have to note. And then we'll discuss that what kind of agreements which we have reached between India and China. And also a diplomacy of China is called as wolf warrior diplomacy. So what exactly is wolf warrior diplomacy of China? See, China is trying to bargain the entire world. And today China is responsible for connecting to the entire world through Belt and Road Initiative. So first of all, let's see all these points of differences, then we come to all these topics and then try to culminate Sino-Indian ties and this topic. Right on the other bones of contention between India and China, the other bones of contention between India and China, bones of contention between India and China includes China's support to Pakistan, includes China's support to Pakistan, both in military and economic terms, both in military and economic terms, which is responsible for disturbing, the balance of power in Indian subcontinent, which is responsible for disturbing the balance of power in Indian subcontinent, balance of power in Indian subcontinent. That's one. Then also we can see that the nuclear weapon program of India is also bone of contention between India and China. Write down the nuclear weapon program of India, nuclear weapons program of India, is also bone of contention between the nuclear weapons program of India is also bone of contention between India and China, is also bone of contention between India and China. And then we can see the growing Chinese naval presence in the Indian Ocean and also the support given by Chinese to insurgency and Naxalite movement in India is another sort of point of difference between the two sides. Write down the growing Chinese naval presence, the growing Chinese naval presence in Indian Ocean, naval presence in Indian Ocean, and support given by China, to Naxalite group, and insurgent groups in India, is also a matter of concern, But one concern for China, not for us, one concern for China is the growing proximity between India and US, because US wants to counterbalance China with the help of India. Right on. Another growing concern for Chinese, is the proximity. Another growing concern for Chinese is the proximity between India and US. As US wants to utilize India, for counterbalancing China, as US wants to utilize India for counterbalancing China. And we can see that the Ganga Mekong initiative started by India, which includes 6 nations, is a matter of concern for China, because China always had this advantage of aligning with these countries for development. Clear? Read on the Ganga Mekong initiative. Mekong initiative started by started by India in 2000 consisting of six nations consisting of six nations the Ganga Mekong initiative started by India in 2000 consisting of six nations, and six nations India, Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam and Thailand, is a concern for China. It's a concern for China. Why? Although we emphasize on the common areas of interest like culture, tourism, transport, education, these are the main areas of interest in Ganga Mekong initiative, but these countries are hydrocarbon reserves also. Clear? And both India and China are energy starved nations suffering from energy crisis. That's why we can say that it's a growing concern for China, the Ganga Mekong initiative. Now, India constructing frontier road, 1700 kilometer of frontier road from Bomdila in Arunachal Pradesh to Vijayanagar is a matter of concern for China. Write down the construction of frontier road. From Bomdila, that's in Arunachal Pradesh, Bomdila in Arunachal Pradesh, to Vijayanagar, and that's near India-Myanmar border. To Vijayanagar, India-Myanmar border, is a matter of concern for China. Clear? So the construction of this road is a matter of concern for China. So all these are bones of contention. Then China not supporting India on the UN Security Council Resolution 1267, which calls for zero tolerance on the issue of terrorism, also became a bone of contention between the two sides. Write down China not supporting India. On the UNSC resolution, resolution 1267, on the UNSC resolution 1267, which calls for zero tolerance, on the issue of terrorism, also became a bone of contention between the two countries. And see, another bone of contention is also the water issue. Why? Because China is responsible for constructing 3 dams on Brahmaputra and regulating the flow of Brahmaputra, Jigsu, Jiacha and Zangmu. Write down, China is also responsible for constructing 3 dams on Brahmaputra, Jigsu, Zangmu and Jiacha. And India accuses China of regulating the flow of river Brahmaputra. India accuses China of regulating the flow of river Brahmaputra. India accuses China of regulating the flow of river Brahmaputra. the flow of river Brahmaputra. Clear? So all these are bones of contention between India and China. Not more than that. Many other bones of contention, but this much is enough for writing. Let's see. When you talk about, see, in 1954, we signed an agreement with China which pertained to trade in Tibet, and this was based on Panchshir. But after that, after 1962, no high dignitary from India visited China. The only person to visit China during the Morarji Desai government regime, the Janata Party government in 1977, was the then External Affairs Minister of India, Mr. Vajpayee. He later on became the Prime Minister of India also. But the ice was broken in the year 1988 when Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi paid a visit to China. So when he visited China in 1988, an agreement was reached, and this agreement was for establishment of joint working group to settle the territorial dispute. Needless to say that the joint working group meets only to decide the date of its another meeting. So that's only the development that joint working group is responsible for. But joint working group was established in 19, and when Prime Minister of India in the year 1988 went to China, he was openly welcomed by the Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping, saying, "Welcome, young friend from India." So that was said by Deng Xiaoping. And then we can see in the year 1991, Chinese Premier Li Peng came to India. Li Peng came to India. When he visited India, a decision was taken to open the Consulate General. Consulate General is mainly for commercial purpose. Clear? So a decision was taken to open the Consulate General at Shanghai and also at Mumbai. So that was in 1991. After that, we can see that in the year 2003, Prime Minister Mr. Vajpayee paid a visit to China. So when he visited China, he was responsible for issuing a very important statement, and he said that the common interest of India and China is responsible for outweighing their differences. So the common interest of India and China is responsible for outweighing their differences. And here we can say that this statement of Prime Minister Vajpayee was responsible for a changing trend in India's foreign policy. And what changing trend? Because the political diplomacy paved the way for economic diplomacy. Clear? So this was responsible for changing trend in India's foreign policy, as the political diplomacy was responsible for paving the way for economic diplomacy. So there are territorial disputes between India and China. But despite these territorial disputes, the bilateral trade between India and China is more than $100 billion. Now this cannot be applied in case of Pakistan, because Pakistan sticks to what is called as the core issue, according to them. And the core issue is what? Core issue is Jammu and Kashmir. Clear? Despite anything, they will stick to the core issue, and the core issue is, they become bankrupt also. They will stick to the core issue, and that is called as the core issue of Jammu and Kashmir. Now here we can see and notice a changing trend in India's foreign policy, and political diplomacy paves the way for economic diplomacy. There are many changing trends in India's foreign policy. One such trend is this. Because our diplomacy now emphasizes on what? Our diplomacy now emphasizes on culture, connectivity, commerce. This is our diplomacy. Clear? Our diplomacy emphasizes on shared prosperity, dignity, dialogue. Clear? So all these are included in our diplomacy. They are the main determinants of India's foreign policy now. Clear? Main determinants. In the same year, 2003, a decision was taken that we would be responsible for reopening of Nathula Pass. So after 44 years in the year 2006, the Nathula Pass was reopened. Clear? And it was reopened. And then we can see that in the year 2008, Prime Minister of India, Mr. Dr. Manmohan Singh, visited China, and he made a very important statement, and he said that the bilateral relationship between India and China should move to a multilateral one. And multilateral means that there should be more centers of power in the world. Clear? So the bilateral relationship between India and China should now move to multilateral ones. See, what I have said is the Prime Minister's statement, Mr. Vajpayee's statement in 2003 mid, he said that the common interest of India and China outweigh their differences. So if suppose we are taking a balance, and on one side is the common interest of India and China, and second side is the differences. So which one is heavier? Heavier is the common interest. So we should emphasize on the common interest. What are the common interests between India and China? Trade, commerce, these are the common interest. Environmental issues, because the developed nations, their stand is different on global warming and climate change. Our stand is different on global warming and climate change. We emphasize on what? We emphasize on the polluter pays principle, both India and China. We emphasize on what? Ecological depth. We emphasize on what? Common but differentiated responsibility. Clear? So that's the common interest that we have. So our common interest is responsible for outweighing our differences. Outweighing our differences. And one such common interest is what? It is, and this reflects a changing trend in India's foreign policy. Because earlier, the foreign policy of India mainly emphasized on what? Mainly emphasized on soft power. But now the foreign policy of India emphasizes on soft and hard power. Early and today we can see that the foreign policy of India is governed by more and more of commercial interests. So there are three pillars of our foreign policy now. One is commerce, second is connectivity, and third is what? Third is culture. Culture, why? Because we are a soft power. Clear? Three pillars of. And then there are many new determinants of our foreign policy, which includes, definitely, which includes dialogue, which includes dignity, which includes shared prosperity, which includes culture even. So there are many new determinants of our foreign policy in this matter. So this is the meaning of the statement given by Prime Minister Vajpayee. Clear? In the year 2013, we can see an agreement was signed between the two sides, which was called as Border Cooperation Agreement. And the purpose was to stop the tailing patrols on both the sides. That was the objective. And a hotline should be established between the military headquarters of two countries. Despite that, we can see Galwan crisis or Devsan took place. Devsan took place earlier. Galwan crisis took place after that agreement. Then in the year 2014 also, new pass was opened. Nathula Pass was opened for Mansarovar Yatra. Earlier there was only one way for the Mansarovar Yatra, and that was Lipu Lake. So one concession was made by China for India, and that was the opening of Nathula Pass. Then also in 2015 we can see that Chengdu, and it was decided that Chengdu, which is in China, and Chennai, which is in India, would be developed as consulate general. Obviously, in 2017, we were engaged in a 70-day standoff with China on the Doklam issue. But this ended when? It ended in the year 2018, when the two sides were responsible for conducting an informal summit. And that informal summit was conducted at Wuhan. Wuhan is known for all wrong reasons these days. Clear? So Wuhan was deliberately selected by China. And why Wuhan was deliberately selected by China? Because it reflects Chinese economic resilience. Because this is a big commercial city. Clear? So China selected Wuhan to show India that we are not affected by the standoff. We have such big commercial cities like Wuhan. So Wuhan was a reflection of Chinese resilience. 2019 informal summit was conducted between India and China, and that was conducted at where? That was conducted at Mamallapuram, which is near Chennai. And this was deliberately selected by India. This city was deliberately selected by India. Why? Because it reflects India's soft power. Because Mamallapuram is famous worldwide for its culture, art, tradition. So it reflects India's soft power. But India also tried to remind the Chinese that because Mamallapuram was a very famous city during the Pallava dynasty. And the Pallava ruler, Narasimha Varman II, before him the Chinese came for help to fight the mighty Tibetans. So it reflects Chinese, if it was responsible for reflecting the legacy of India's strong past. So not only it was a reflection of India's soft power, but also a reflection of legacy of India's strong past. Clear? So this was also reflected. So Mamallapuram was selected for this purpose. And informal summits are what? Informal summits are mainly a trust building exercise. There is no official declaration of informal summit. Official declaration of China today carries out a diplomacy which is called as wolf warrior diplomacy. And the supporters of the President Xi Jinping is responsible for carrying out this earlier. The diplomacy of China was nothing but a passive diplomacy. Now it is proactive, more assertive, and they are responsible for promoting the Chinese interest. This diplomacy is carried out by the Chinese against countries like US, Australia, Japan. This kind of diplomacy is used, and that is to project a better image of China, not a tarnished image of China. They are using cyber diplomacy for this purpose also. See, a changing trend in foreign policy of any nation is cyber diplomacy. And then we'll discuss what exactly is the meaning of cyber diplomacy. Clear? Cyber diplomacy. There are different types of diplomacy, but one diplomacy is called as cyber diplomacy. And then we conclude the entire story. Clear? Write down the breakthroughs. Breakthroughs. In 1988, Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi visited China. Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi visited China. And the ice was broken. And the ice was broken. Ice was broken. The two sides agreed to establish joint working group for territorial disputes. The two sides agreed to establish joint working group for territorial disputes. Territorial disputes. Territorial disputes. In 1991, the Chinese premier, Li Peng visited India. The Chinese premier Li Peng visited India. And a decision was taken. To open the Consulate General. And a decision was taken to open the Consulate General. That's mainly for commercial purpose. Consulate General at Shanghai, and also Mumbai, and Shanghai and Mumbai. In 2003, Prime Minister Vajpayee visited China. Prime Minister Vajpayee visited China. Vajpayee visited China. And he made a very interesting statement. He said that the common interest of India and China outweigh their differences. Right on. He stated that common interest of India and China. He stated that common interest of India and China. Interest of India and China. outweigh their differences. Common interest of India and China outweigh their differences. Outweigh their differences. And that's why we can see that the two sides decided to establish the joint study group. And the joint study group was for mainly building commercial and trade ties. Right on. The two sides decided to establish, joint study group. The two sides decided to establish joint study group, mainly to promote trade and commerce, mainly to promote trade and commerce. And we can see here a changing trend of India's foreign policy can be noticed. That is what that political diplomacy paves the way for economic diplomacy. Right on. Here a changing trend in India's foreign policy can be noticed. Here a changing trend in India's foreign policy can be noticed. India's foreign policy can be noticed. That political diplomacy paved the way for economic diplomacy. 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 So, although we have territorial disputes between the two sides, the bilateral trade between the two sides is more than $100 billion. Right down. Despite the territorial disputes, the bilateral trade between the two sides, is more than 100 billion. More than 100 billion. The bilateral trade between the two sides is more than 100 billion. Clear? Fine. But the problem is what? Problem is the trade deficit. Because this favorite trade, the trade is in favor of China. And there's a huge trade gap in this. We know that we have discussed the imbalances there. So this is political diplomacy paving the way for economic diplomacy. Now, we can also say that India's foreign policy today is based on three main pillars. The three C's, and that is called as what? That is called as commerce, connectivity, and also culture. Right on. India's foreign policy today is based on three main pillars. Commerce, connectivity, and culture. Clear? And new determinants of India's foreign policy also includes dignity, dialogue, share prosperity. Clear? Write down. New determinants of India's foreign policy also includes dignity, dialogue, shared prosperity. So these are new determinants of India's foreign policy. Clear? But India's foreign policy is stressing on commerce, culture, connectivity. That's why political diplomacy paved the way for economic diplomacy. In the year 2006, we can see Nathula Pass in Sikkim was opened after a gap of 44 years. Right down. In the year 2006, Nathula Pass in Sikkim was opened. After a gap of 44 years. 44 years. Sikkim was opened after a gap of 44 years. Clear? And then in the year 2008, when during the Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh's visit, we can see that India emphasized on converting bilateral ties into multilateral ones. Right on. In the year 2008, during Dr. Manmohan Singh's visit, Dr. Manmohan Singh's visit, India emphasized on converting bilateral ties. India emphasized on converting bilateral ties to multilateral ones. Bilateral ties to multilateral. Clear? Fine. And after this, we can see in the year 2013. Border cooperation agreement was signed. That is a notable agreement, and this is for ending of tailing patrol, because for the surveillance of the entire border there are tailing patrols from both the sides, and establishment of a hotline between military headquarters of two countries. Clear? So that was said. Right down. In the year 2013, border cooperation agreement was signed. Border cooperation agreement was signed. Agreement was signed for the purpose of ending tailing patrols, which monitors the borders, for the purpose of ending tailing patrols, and also for the purpose of establishing a hotline between military headquarters of two countries. And also for the purpose of establishing a hotline between military headquarters of two countries. Clear? So that was done. Then we can see in the year 2014, China opened, Nathula Pass was opened for Mansarovar Yatra. Earlier the pass was only conducted through Lipu Lake. The Yatra was only conducted through Lipu Lake. So now India has two passes. Right down. In the year 2014, the Nathula Pass was opened for Mansarovar Yatra. In the year 2014, the Nathula Pass was opened for Mansarovar Yatra. Earlier, this yatra was conducted only through Lipu Lake. Lipu Lake. Nathula Pass was opened for Mansarovar Yatra. I should not write this side. Mansarovar Yatra. Earlier, this yatra was conducted only through Lipu Lake. Lipu Lake is a pass also. Fine. And then we can see in the year 2015, a decision was taken to establish Consulate General at Chengdu and also at Chennai. Right down. In the year 2015, a decision was taken to establish Consulate General. At Chengdu and Chennai. Consulate General at Chengdu and Chennai. Fine. Consulate General is mainly for commercial purpose. All these were the developments. But after the standoff between India and China over the Doklam issue in the year 2017, we can see that in the year 2018, informal summit was conducted at Wuhan. Wuhan. Clear? Right on. After the standoff between India and China, standoff between India and China in 2017, and you know the issue over which the standoff took place. That was Doklam. In 2017, over Doklam issue, over Doklam issue, over Doklam issue, the trust building exercise started again. The trust building exercise started again. In 2018, through informal summit at Wuhan. Through informal summit at Wuhan. Clear? So informal summit is what? Informal summit is nothing but a summit which is mainly for building trust between two nations, and this summit does not carry any kind of official declaration. So this kind of summit is called as what? It is called as informal summit. So we started to conduct informal summit, and first such summit was conducted at Wuhan. Clear? In which China was responsible for giving India many concessions. But this informal summit was conducted at Wuhan. And the conditions were different also. Because with US, China started, there was a trade war between US and China. This benefited India also. Fine. But Wuhan was nothing but a reflection of Chinese economic resilience. On the other hand, the second informal summit was conducted at Mamallapuram, which was a reflection of not only India's soft power, but it reminded China of the glorious past of India, and that was of the Pallava dynasty. When the Chinese came for help, Chinese sought help from India, Pallava ruler, to fight the mighty Tibetans. Clear? Right on. Wuhan was a reflection of Chinese economic resilience. A reflection of Chinese economic resilience. It's a big commercial city. Reflection of Chinese economic resilience. On the other hand, the second informal summit, was conducted. The second informal summit was conducted at Mamallapuram, that's near Chennai in India. The second informal summit was conducted at Mamallapuram, that's in the year 2019. And it reflected what? It not only reflected India's soft power, because this is very famous worldwide for its paintings, culture. It not only reflected India's soft power, as it is famous worldwide, for its architecture, as it is famous worldwide for its architecture. But then it also reflected what? It also reminded Chinese of the India's glorious past. It also reminded China. It also reminded China of India's glorious past. It also reminded China of India's glorious past. Of India's glorious past. Why? Because this was an important city of Pallava dynasty where the Chinese came short to seek help from the Pallava ruler to fight the mighty Tibetans. Right on, as it was an important city, as it was an important city of the Pallava dynasty, of the Pallava dynasty, of the Pallava dynasty, where the Chinese came for, where the Chinese, where the Chinese came to seek help from India, came to seek help, where the Chinese came to seek help to fight the mighty Tibetans. So Tibetans were so powerful. To fight the mighty Tibetans. To fight the mighty Tibetans. Clear? And one diplomacy that China is following today is called as what? It is called as wolf warrior diplomacy. So earlier the diplomacy of Chinese was what? Chinese diplomacy was nothing but an inactive, passive diplomacy. But now we can see China is following an aggressive, proactive diplomacy for promotion of its national interest, particularly against countries like US, Australia, Japan. This diplomacy is called as wolf warrior diplomacy. Clear? So the supporters of Chinese President Xi Jinping, they are responsible for following a diplomacy which is called as wolf warrior diplomacy. And see, wolf warrior diplomacy is for projecting a better image of China in the entire world, not allow the tarnished image of China, because China is suffering from many problems. So it is for projecting a better image of China in the entire world, and also for promotion of Chinese national interest. They are using for this purpose cyber diplomacy also. Cyber diplomacy means what? That if today we are using, suppose social media is used for having uninterrupted communication with targeted groups for promotion of national interest, then this kind of diplomacy would be called as cyber diplomacy. Clear? Promotion of national interest, and this kind of diplomacy would be called as cyber diplomacy. And this diplomacy is also for the purpose of solving what is called as wicked problems. Wicked problems means the concept of wicked problem was given by churchmen. And wicked problem implies, it means what? It means that if we tend to solve these problems, new problems emerge. For example, global warming and climate change is a wicked problem. Clear? Because if you try to solve these problems, this is associated with many other problems. So that's called as what? That would be referred to as wicked problem. Fine. Wicked problem. And this diplomacy can also be used by India. This cyber diplomacy can also be used by India. But when you are referring to wolf warrior diplomacy, make a reference to, there are many kinds of diplomacy today. One diplomacy is called as what? It's called as para-diplomacy. Para-diplomacy through which the states of India can have ties with other countries or states of other countries. So that's called as para-diplomacy. Then there is a type of diplomacy which is called as religious diplomacy, which is followed by Prime Minister Mr. Modi. There's a type of diplomacy which is called as medical diplomacy. Fine. So all these types of diplomacy A common interest between India and China is also global warming and climate change. So that we'll mention, and then we try to end up this relationship. Some of the entire discussion. Clear? We'll try to sum up the entire discussion. Write down. Supporters of Chinese President Xi Jinping are ardently following a diplomacy called wolf warrior diplomacy. Ardently following a diplomacy called wolf warrior diplomacy. And we can see that in this form of diplomacy, the inactive, passive diplomacy, earlier the diplomacy which was followed by China was inactive, passive diplomacy. Now this has been converted into what? This has been converted into a proactive diplomacy. And this is aggressive diplomacy also, which is called as wolf warrior diplomacy. Right down earlier, the diplomacy followed by China was inactive, passive diplomacy, which now has been converted into proactive, aggressive diplomacy, called wolf warrior diplomacy, which now has been converted into proactive, aggressive diplomacy called wolf warrior diplomacy. And mainly this diplomacy is followed against countries like US, Australia, Japan. Right down. Mainly this kind of diplomacy is followed against countries like US, Japan, Australia, Australia. And the purpose is to project a better image of China and to aggressively promote the national interest. Right on, the purpose is to project a better image of China. The purpose is to project a better image of China. And also to promote aggressively the Chinese national interest. And we can see that wolf warrior diplomacy uses cyber diplomacy also. Write down. Wolf warrior diplomacy uses cyber diplomacy also. Wolf warrior diplomacy uses cyber diplomacy also. Wolf warrior diplomacy uses cyber diplomacy also. And what is cyber diplomacy? Cyber diplomacy is a changing trend in the foreign policy of different nations. And this is for the purpose of using social media to have unrestricted communication with targeted groups for promotion of national interest. Write down. Cyber diplomacy has been defined as the use of social media Cyber diplomacy has been defined as the use of social media to have to have unrestricted to have unrestricted communications unrestricted communications with targeted groups, unrestricted communication with targeted groups for promotion of national interest, for promotion of national interest. So that kind of diplomacy is called as what? It is called as cyber diplomacy. And as far as cyber diplomacy is concerned, we can see that in cyber diplomacy, not only this is done, but it is also for the purpose of solving what is referred to as wicked problem. Write down. Cyber diplomacy is also for the purpose of solving. Cyber diplomacy is also for the purpose of solving wicked problems. Wicked problems. And as far as the concept of wicked problem is concerned, the concept of wicked problem was given by churchmen. And these problems are known for their complexities. Write down. The concept of wicked problem, the concept of wicked problem was given by churchmen. The concept of wicked problem was given by churchmen. And is known for its complexities. And is known for its complexities. Known for its complexities. So if we tend to solve these problems, we can see new problems would emerge. Write down. If we try to solve these problems, new problems emerge. If we try to solve these problems, new problems emerge. New problems emerge. Is that clear? New problems emerge. So that's called as wicked problem. One common interest of India and China is also the climate talks. And both of them are opposed to developed nation when it comes to global warming and climate talks, because both the countries, their stand is based on what? It stand is based on ecological depth and polluter pays principle, as well as CBDR. All these things you have studied in environment. Right on. A common interest between India and China, that's the last part that we will be dealing. A common interest between India and China, is also the climate talks. And we can see that both India and China are opposed to the developed world, and their stand is based on polluter pays principle, as well as ecological depth, as well as common but differentiated responsibility. Right on. Both the nations are opposed to the developed world. Both the nations are opposed to the developed world. Nations are opposed to the developed world. As their stand is based on, as their stand is based on polluter pays principle, as their stand is based on polluter pays principle. So those who are responsible for polluting the atmosphere of the earth would be responsible for funding those initiatives. Polluter pays principle, ecological depth, and common but differentiated responsibility. and common but differentiated responsibilities. Common but differentiated responsibilities. Clear this much in. And lastly, we can conclude India-China relation by writing that both the nation, if we talk about India and China, both the nation aspire for what? Both the nation aspire for regional hegemony. Both the nation aspire for both, not only regional hegemony, but also economic progress. And as such, both the nation cannot be permanent friends or permanent enemies. So they cannot be permanent friends or permanent enemies. And that's why we can see that the time is, it's very imperative to think about the common concerns, and a balanced approach should be taken, particularly for resolving the territorial disputes, because Confucius, a Chinese scholar, once remarked that better fences make better neighbors. That's how you would be concluding India and China. That's the last part. That's the last part. Write down. Both the nations aspire for regional hegemony. Both the nations aspire for. That's a common thing between the two. Both the nations aspire for regional hegemony. Both the nations aspire for regional hegemony and also economic progress. And also economic progress. Economic progress. And as such, we can see the interest of the two sides overlaps each other. Right on. As such, the interest of the two sides. As such, the interest of the two sides overlap with each other. As such, the interest of the two sides overlap with each other. And that's the reason why we can say that both the sides cannot be permanent friends or cannot be permanent enemies. As such, both cannot be permanent friends. As such, both cannot be permanent friends and permanent enemies, as both cannot be permanent friends and permanent enemies. Permanent enemies. Now, certainly, it's imperative that both sides take a balanced approach. Urgent. Both sides take a balanced approach, particularly on territorial disputes. Write down. It is imperative that both sides take a balanced approach. It is imperative that both sides take a balanced approach. Both sides take a balanced approach. Balanced approach. Particularly on territorial disputes. Particularly on territorial disputes. Territorial disputes. And that's why when we can say that the Confucius, who was a Chinese scholar, once he said that better fences make better neighbors. Confucius, the Chinese scholar. Confucius, the Chinese scholar, once remarked that better fences make better neighbors. Confucius, the Chinese scholar, once remarked that better fences make better neighbors. Better fences make better neighbors. This much in India-China relations. Clear? I think that's enough for writing any kind of question on India-China. We have studied what are the internal problems in China. We have studied what are the factors which are responsible for Chinese resurgence as a global player. We have studied what are the disputes between India and China, not only Tibet but also the land pearl theory and string of pearls theory. What stapled visa, what are the other disputes between India and China, and also Galwan, then Ladakh, then Arunachal Pradesh, Tawang, etc., etc. Major breakthroughs in our relationship, Wolf warrior diplomacy, how it is linked to cyber diplomacy, and then what needs to be done for this purpose. Clear? What needs to be done for this purpose? This much in India-China relation. Now let's start our relationship with another hostile neighbor. We cannot say hostile neighbor, but we know that the neighbor is a hostile neighbor, and that is your Pakistan. So let's start today with India-Pakistan relations. India-Pakistan relations. Fine. Let's cover up that. Now, see, I'll take just 1 second break. Let's drink water, some water. See, why I needed a break? Because I needed to recharge myself to discuss India-Pakistan relation. Fine. And in discussing India-Pakistan relation, first of all, energy drinks would be required because you have to get fired up. Because the rhetoric takes place from the Pakistani side also, and we are also responsible for reacting against those rhetoric. Often the ministers of Pakistan say that that we haven't developed nuclear weapons for Diwali. Although Diwali is hardly celebrated in Pakistan. The population of Hindus is only 1%. But we haven't developed nuclear weapons. We would be using it against India. Now, recently, a statement of Prime Minister Mr. Vajpayee was published in the newspaper. And when the Kargil crisis took place, 1999, then Pakistan leaders, they told the US administration that they can go to the extent of using nuclear bombs against India. They can use, if India continues its operation like that, then they can use nuclear bombs against India. Prime Minister Vajpayee said that I can surrender 25% of India's territory. That can be surrendered by me. Maybe it gets destroyed by Pakistan's nuclear weapon. But Pakistan will not see the next morning. It means that wiping out Pakistan from the global map. Clear? So Pakistan would not see the next morning as such. So that's the statement made by Prime Minister Mr. Vajpayee, and this was definitely came out in the newspapers recently, that what Prime Minister Vajpayee said. But if you talk about India-Pakistan ties, you can see culturally, geographically, historically, no two countries are so much similar like India and Pakistan. The irony is what? That the bitter enemies like France and Germany today are sitting as members of European Union. But the trust deficit between India and Pakistan continues. And the trust deficit between India and Pakistan is nothing but a legacy of the past. A legacy of the past. And why we are saying that the trust deficit between India and Pakistan is a legacy of the past? Because Pakistan in 1947 was born on two-nation theory. Two-nation theory. That Hindus and Muslims are two separate nations within the Indian subcontinent. And the Muslims should have their own countries. So it was born on two-nation theory. Clear? When we talk about nation, nation is a group of people having a common language, having common religion, having common ethnic origin, having common customs and tradition. So that is called as a nation. Clear? So that would be called as a nation. But in India, we do not consider religion as the basis of nation. Fine, I repeat my words, that when you talk about a nation, it's a group of people belonging to the common ethnic origin, having a common language, having a common religion, having common history, having common customs and tradition. But in India, we do not consider religion as the basis of nation. So we adhere to what is called as one nation theory. So if a diverse country like India, if a country which is known for its diversity, so if a diverse country like India, despite the diversity that it has, adheres to one nation theory, that kind of nation is called as what? That kind of nation is called as pluralistic nation. Clear? Pluralistic state. So India is basically what? India is basically pluralistic state. India adheres to one nation theory, whereas origin of Pakistan was on two nation theory. Fine. Now in this context, there's a theory also, and that theory is given by John Stuart Mill. John Stuart Mill, a philosopher, political scientist. He was responsible for writing two big works. One is called as what? One is referred to as the two big works written by John Stuart Mill. One is I'm failing to recollect it, but and I'll recapitulate it just now. But uh, when you talk about John Stuart Mill's theory, the famous theory that John Stuart Mill has given is called as what? It is called as right to self-determination. Now, according to him, according to John Stuart Mill, if a country has many nations within it, if a state has many nations within it, then the institutions of that nation cannot function properly. They would be biased. Clear? They would be biased. So, for free functioning of these institutions in a state, what is desirable is that each and every nation should have the right to self-determination. Clear? Each and every nation should have the right to self-determination. And see, India has not criticized the junta government severely. Why? Amal, Anal, why? Because India has a policy towards Myanmar. And the policy towards Myanmar is what? That on one side, India is responsible for engaging the military junta. And on other side, India is responsible for supporting the democratic movement. And that is the policy. India is never responsible for irking the military junta of Myanmar because India shares boundary with Myanmar. Clear? And the military junta of Myanmar is also never responsible for going against India. In fact, the insurgency in Northeast was checked with the help of military junta of Myanmar. Clear? Fine. That's why we are not responsible for criticizing. We support the democratic process. We would like Aung San Suu Kyi to be again leader of Myanmar. But this does not mean that we won't be engaging with the military junta. We engage with them. And that's the policy of India towards Myanmar. Clear? So you can see John Stuart Mill has said that free institutions are impossible to exist in a state which has many nations within it. So each and every nation should be given the right to self-determination. And right to self-determination means that the right to decide that with whom it would be politically associated. The right to self-determination means that the right to decide with whom it would be politically associated. Clear? But if suppose this right is given to each and every nation, this can lead to what? This can lead to the bifurcation of state or the trifurcation of state or the fragmentation of states also. So the eminent political scientists during that period, they realized this problem and they were responsible for imposing certain conditions for right to self-determination. And these conditions include what? These conditions include that right to self-determination can be exercised by the nation if the state goes against the nation, customs, religion, language, so as to impair the moral values of the people, then only right to self-determination can be exercised. Otherwise, it cannot be exercised. It cannot be exercised. Clear? So then only the right to self-determination can be exercised. Otherwise, it cannot be exercised. So in context of Kashmir, we would be using the right to self-determination here. Fine. So here we can see that Pakistan was born on two-nation theory. The two-nation theory of Pakistan got defeated itself in year 1947. And why? Because in 1947, a large segment of Muslims decided to make India their homeland. That was the first time when the two-nation theory of Pakistan got defeated. The two-nation theory of Pakistan again got defeated in 1971 with the formation of Bangladesh, because the religion of these two areas were the same. East Pakistan and West Pakistan was the same. Clear. East Pakistan and West Pakistan was the same. See, Bangladesh separated from Biswajit, Bangladesh separated from Pakistan. Why? Because if you look at, you're from Bengal, and you can see the culture of Bengal, and that is the same with Bangladesh also. Although the religion can be different in West Bengal, primarily Hindus, Muslims are all present, but Bangladesh, 90% Muslims are only present. But if you talk about West Pakistan and East Pakistan, the culture of West Pakistan and East Pakistan was different. And remember that cultural difference is always greater than the religious difference. It was bound for separation. The second problem was that why it separated. It separated also why? Because geographical continuity between East Pakistan and West Pakistan lacked. And the third reason was what? The third reason was that strategically it was in favor of India also. But the third reason was what? That the West Pakistan was dominated by Punjab province. Still today also you can see West Pakistan is dominated by the Punjab province. Pakistan is dominated by Punjab province tried to impose its will on East Pakistan. East Pakistan. Clear? So this led to the formation of Bangladesh. I hope that's clear. Cultural difference, if you look at the culture of Bengal and the culture of Punjab, there's a big difference between the two sides. Clear? Geographical continuity lacked between the two. Fine. My question is that Pakistan, various conflicts are occurring, like the Baluch and Pakistan has separate propaganda that India is supplying arms and money to these Baluch. We'll come to that. We'll discuss Baluch problem. First of all, is it real that India interfering in another country's internal affairs? And secondly, if it's true, is this ethical? We'll come to that. We'll discuss. See, if you hit me 10 times, at least once I would react. This is the case with India. That you are making wounds on India plenty of times, and India was now ready to react. So the Prime Minister on the eve of Independence Day from the Lal Killa said that we would be supporting the Baluch. Supporting the Baluch does not mean that we are supplying arms. We won't do that. And if suppose the nation supports even, they will never say formally this. But support to Baluch is in India's interest, and we'll look into it how it is in India's interest. Clear? Support to Baluch. See, the problem was what? Baluchistan was not a part of Pakistan. In fact, when Pakistan was formed, Baluchistan was not a part of Pakistan. In fact, Baluchistan wanted to join India. Fine. So when the Baluch leader came to meet Pandit Nehru, Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad, India rejected this proposal and said that it is distant away from India. And what distant away? Why not East Pakistan? West Pakistan was cited as example. And this matter leaked into the Pakistani press when the Pakistani military went and captured Baluchistan. Otherwise, Baluchistan was not a part of Pakistan. In fact, the irony is what? That all those areas are in Pakistan which never voted for creation of Pakistan. Sindh never voted for creation of Pakistan. Punjab never voted for creation of Pakistan. Who voted for the establishment of Pakistan? Bihar, Uttar Pradesh. These are the areas which voted for the establishment of Pakistan, and those areas are with India. Clear? Those areas are with India. So this is the biggest irony of our relationship. Clear? So let's see all this, and let's write the introduction at least of India-Pakistan relation right now, because time is running out. Because if we get into all these discussions, it will never end. It will never end. Right on. India-Pakistan relations. No two countries are geographically, culturally, and historically so much similar than India and Pakistan. No two countries are geographically, culturally, and historically so much similar than India and Pakistan. Even bitter enemies like Germany and France. Even bitter enemies like Germany and France. Even bitter enemies like Germany and France are sitting together as members of European Union. But the bitterness between India and Pakistan continues. The trust deficit between India and Pakistan. And suppose this is asked as question. Trust deficit between India and Pakistan is a legacy of the past. The trust deficit between India and Pakistan is a legacy of the past. And why we are saying so? Because Pakistan came into existence on two-nation theory. Right on. Pakistan came into existence on two-nation theory. Pakistan came into existence on two-nation theory. On the other hand, India is a pluralistic state. And adheres to one nation theory. And India does not consider religion as the basis of nation. Right down. India does not consider religion as the basis of nation. India does not consider religion as the basis of nation. Clear? Fine. So two-nation theory and one-nation theory. But we can see that two-nation theory of Pakistan was defeated in 1947 itself, when a large population of Muslim decided to make India their homeland. Right on. The two-nation theory of Pakistan was defeated in 1947 itself. The two-nation theory of Pakistan was defeated in 1947 itself, when a large number of Muslims decided to make India their homeland. That's the first thing. First time it was defeated. And the second time it was defeated in 1971, when Bangladesh was formed. Right down. It was defeated also in 1971. It was defeated also in 1971 when Bangladesh was formed. When Bangladesh was formed. It was defeated in 1971 when Bangladesh was formed. Bangladesh was formed. Was formed. Clear? So two nation theory, one nation theory, and that's one reason. See, Pakistan has many tags. Pakistan is called as a failed state. Pakistan is called as hotbed of terrorism. Pakistan is called as controlled democracy. Pakistan is called as deep state also. So there are many tags for Pakistan. Clear? Suppose people of Pakistan listen to me, they would be pelting stones at me. Clear? But this Pakistan has many tags. So it is nothing but a terrorist state, can be called as a terrorist state, a failed state, a deep state. Deep state, why? Because the main power belongs to the ISI and the military. Clear? ISI and the military, and also it is referred to as controlled democracy because democracy comes in the form of seasons in Pakistan. Right now, Pakistan has many tags. Pakistan has many tags. It is called as a failed state. It is called as a failed state. A terrorist state. A terrorist state. A deep state. And also controlled democracy. And also a controlled democracy. Suppose democracy is there, it would be always controlled by the military establishment. It would be always controlled by the ISI. So many tags for Pakistan. But the trust deficit between India and Pakistan is not only due to two nation theory and one nation theory. The trust deficit between India and Pakistan is due to other reasons also. And one such reason is what? One such reason is that the tendency to compete with India. Why? Because Pakistan always wants to compete with India. Despite the population of India being more, despite the area in India being more. So in the words of Professor S.S. Harrison, this undue competition has been reflected. And mind the words what he says. He says that frustrated and at loose ends. Now this is about Pakistan, not about us. So frustrated and at loose ends. Pakistan tries to seek respect and recognition disproportionate to its size. That's like India, disproportionate to its size. It huffs and buffs, strives endlessly. It huffs and buffs, and to its understandable despair, finds India even larger. Clear? So this is reflected by in the words of S.S. Harrison. Fine. So the trust deficit between India and Pakistan is on account of other reasons also, and one such reason is the tendency to compete with India. Write down the trust deficit between India and Pakistan. The trust deficit between India and Pakistan. India and Pakistan is due to other reasons also. The trust deficit between India and Pakistan is due to other reasons also. Other reasons also. And one such reason is, the tendency to compete with India. Tendency to compete with India. Compete with India. And why so? Because Pakistan seeks wants the same recognition and respect that India has. Right on, Pakistan wants the same respect and recognition that India has. Pakistan wants the same respect and recognition that India has. That India has. In the words of Professor S.S. Harrison, In the words of Professor S.S. Harrison, frustrated and at loose ends. That's how he speaks about Pakistan. Frustrated and at loose ends. Loose ends. Pakistan seeks recognition and respect. Pakistan seeks recognition and respect. Recognition and respect. Disproportionate. Disproportionate to its size. Disproportionate to its size. It huffs and buffs. It huffs and buffs. And to its understandable despair, that Pakistan understands also, understandable despair, and to its understandable despair, finds India even larger. I repeat, I take myself away from the board. Frustrated and at loose ends, Pakistan seeks recognition and respect. Disproportionate to its size, it huffs and buffs, and to its understandable despair, finds India even larger. And to its understandable despair, finds India even larger. So first reason for trust deficit between India and Pakistan is what? The two nation theory and the one nation theory, India being a pluralistic state. Clear? And the second reason is what? The second reason is the undue tendency to compete with India. Now the third reason behind the trust deficit between India and Pakistan is what? That Pakistan tries to act as spokesman of Indian Muslims, which is responsible for flaring communal tensions in India. And now Pakistan also tries to act. Pakistan also tries to act as spokesman of Indian Muslims, as spokesman of Indian Muslims, which should not be done, because Indian Muslims are living in a democracy. Tries to act as spokesman of Indian Muslims, which flares communal tensions, communal tensions in India, which flares communal tensions in India. Fine. And see, that in 1947, there was a huge, big massacre. Hindu-Muslim riot took place, and everybody knows that story. 2 million people died. 2 million people died. The impact is still on both the sides. Clear? So communal clashes took place. 2 million people died. If you look at in the words of Amrita Pritam, a very famous Punjabi writer, she says what? She says that कुछ ऐसे मंजर भी हैं तारीख के नजर में, लम्हों ने खता की थी, सदियों ने सजा पाई. I translate it into Hindi, sorry, English. This is Urdu, so this is translate it into English. That there are some incidents which have taken place in the past. The decisions were taken instantaneously, but the impact is on future generation. Clear? So one reason for this mistrust is the communal clashes of 1947, where 2 million people died. Right down. Another reason for mistrust between India and Pakistan. Is the communal tensions. Tensions of 1947, communal tensions of 1947, where 2 million people died, where 2 million people died. 2 million people died. And see, another reason for the trust deficit between India and Pakistan. What do we say about Pakistan in India? Publicly, we say that Pakistan was born out of India. Pakistan was carved out of India. Now, this is nothing but a type of abuse to Pakistanis because they want Pakistan to be recognized by India as a separate nation. And they feel that India is never responsible for giving them such recognition. So in India, in the Indian society, we are not talking about the government of India. Because the government of India will never say so. But in the Indian society, the creation of Pakistan has been considered as ephemeral aberration in the history. A decision which was socially unacceptable taken in 1947. So it was considered as ephemeral aberration in the Indian history. But you can see in the year 1999, when Prime Minister Mr. Vajpayee paid a visit to Pakistan and the bus diplomacy was carried out. He went to Lahore from the Atari border, Atari Wagha border, and he went through a bus. The bus was very famous, called Sadai Sarhad. So bus diplomacy was carried. He paid a visit to Pakistan. He paid a visit to Pakistan, and he visited Minar-e-Sharif also in Lahore. And Minar-e-Sharif in Lahore is the place from where the first demand for Pakistan was made. So his visit to Minar-e-Sharif is nothing but recognition of Pakistan as an independent nation by one of the highest dignitaries of India, that's the Prime Minister of India. Prime Minister of India. So he went there and he was responsible for visiting Minar-e-Sharif. But he made a very important statement there also. Not with respect to China only, he has made a statement. He has made a statement there. He said that we can change history, but we cannot change geography. So it means that we were not friends. We can now become friends. So we can change history. But if you think that Jammu and Kashmir would be a part of Pakistan, you are highly mistaken. So that's why he said that we cannot change geography. So we can change history, but we cannot change geography. So this statement was made by Prime Minister Mr. Vajpayee. Clear? So one of the last point here would be what? That Pakistan is responsible for disapproving the fact that creation of Pakistan is considered to be an ephemeral aberration in the Indian history. Write down. Pakistan disapproves the fact that creation of Pakistan is considered to be an ephemeral aberration in the Indian history. Ephemeral aberration in the Indian history. But when in 1999 Prime Minister Mr. Vajpayee paid a visit to Pakistan, he visited Minar-e-Sharif, from where the demand for the first time for Pakistan was made. Write down. But in 1999, When Prime Minister Mr. Vajpayee, when Prime Minister Mr. Vajpayee visited Pakistan, when Prime Minister Mr. Vajpayee visited Pakistan, he paid a visit to Minar-e Sharif. He paid a visit to Minar-e Sharif, Lahore, Minar-e Sharif, Lahore. From where? From where? The first demand for Pakistan was made. From where? The first demand for Pakistan was made. First demand for Pakistan was made. Clear? Now his visit, now this is nothing but recognition of independent existence of Pakistan. This gesture was considered as recognition of independent existence of Pakistan. This gesture was considered as recognition of independent existence of Pakistan. Independent existence of Pakistan. So if we talk about the trust deficit between India and Pakistan, all these points can be written. Clear? They have asked you a question also in examination. That what are the reasons behind the trust deficit? So all these are the reasons behind trust deficit between India and Pakistan. Clear? And this is a legacy of the past. There are other reasons also behind the trust deficit, the terrorist attack on India, the proxy warfare which is carried. Sometimes they can ask you question on terms. For example, they have asked you, what is the difference between proxy warfare, hot pursuit, and surgical strike? So they can further ask you questions also. They can ask you questions like, what is the difference between, or explain what is called as strategic depth, tactical nuclear weapons. So let's first of all understand these terms in context of India-Pakistan relation, and then we'll deal with the differences between India and Pakistan. This is time for a break. So let's have a break right now. Thank you so much.